Today, we're going to talk about development approaches. You'll find development approaches talked about in the Agile Practice Guide and also the PMBOK Guide, 7th edition. However, there's a little bit of confusion because when you read both documents, they seem to take a different route to explain these concepts. So I want to talk about them one by one. First of all, we have predictive. According to the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, it reads, a predictive approach is useful when the project and product requirements can be defined. So we have defined requirements and we have requirements that can be collected. That is one of the hallmarks of predictive. You must be able to collect those requirements upfront. It says this approach may also be used when there is a significant investment involved and a high level of risk. So when do we use predictive? When we have high stakes and high risk. You may also hear where there's a lot of possibility of catastrophe or any possibility of loss of life and things of that nature. It then reads, this development approach allows for the project team to reduce the level of uncertainty early in the project and do much of the planning upfront. Predictive approaches may use proof of concept development to explore options, but the majority of the project work follows the plans that were developed near the start of the project. So we also refer to predictive as plan-driven. We could say this is a plan-driven approach. Now, what distinguishes predictive from the other approaches is our focus on cost-cutting and single delivery. Okay, and that's how predictive works. Now, going over to the account in the Agile Practice Guide of the iterative approach. Iterative approach relies on cycles, and I would like for you to turn to page 19 in the Agile Practice Guide. I'm kind of going between books here for clarity's sake. So in the Agile Practice Guide, page 19, it says iterative allows for feedback. That's one of the key things. It allows for feedback on partially completed or unfinished work. One of the key things is improvement. In a cyclical fashion, we are repeating until correct. We are going to repeat in cycles until we get exactly what we need. Now, if you flip the pages over to a more detailed account on page 21, it says iterative life cycles improve, that's the key word, the product or result through successive prototypes or proofs of concept. It says each new prototype yields new stakeholder feedback and team insights. Then the team incorporates the new information by repeating one or more of the project activities in the next cycle. Teams may use time boxing on a given iteration. So for iterations, it is possible to use the concept of the time box. But when you take a look at the table on page 18 of the Agile Practice Guide, and I'll just put that here, page 18 of the Agile Practice Guide, what you'll notice is the delivery mechanism talked about. This is where the waters become muddy in the 7th edition. If you read the Agile Practice Guide, it makes it very clear that in iterative, we are concerned with the correctness of the solution, but it also does a good job in calling out the fact that because we are working in iterations does not mean we are delivering in pieces. No. In iterative, watch this now, in that table, you see single delivery. And this is what distinguishes between iterative and incremental. So it's very important that you understand this concept of doing things in iterations without release, doing things even with a cadence, releasing different proofs of concepts, prototypes, improving on those proofs of concepts or prototypes until you get to the point where delivery makes sense. Still reading on page 21, it says, projects benefit from iterative life cycles when complexity is high, when the project incurs frequent change, or when the scope is subject to different stakeholder views of the desired product. Iterative life cycles may take longer because they are optimized for learning rather than speed of delivery. So in the world of iterative, we could have a cycle that looks like this. And this is in the Agile Practice Guide. And you can see from this image, the deliver stage right here at the end is a one-time thing. You also see the analyze, design has a loop that goes back, showing you that this is done in cycles. So we have an arrangement that looks like this, but it has loops, which indicate multiple stages of prototyping. That is on page 21 of the Agile Practice Guide. Now, if you look at the 7th edition, go into page 37, there is an image that shows something a little bit different than what we just described. It shows trying different ideas to clarify scope, approach, and requirements, and you have possibly these prototypes being built. And it has, I need a method to capture ideas that might change, and we see some feedback and adapt. And that's all well and good. But if you look below that, you see incremental. And it reads under incremental, progressively develop features and functions. Now that's where there's a problem in the image. So let's move on to incremental and talk about this. In the world of incremental, things are different as accounted for in the Agile Practice Guide. So let's take a look at incremental now. And I'll just do this blue so you know this is a different topic. If you go to the Agile Practice Guide and read the high-level blurb about incremental on page 19, it says, provide finished deliverables. See that? Provide finished deliverables that the customer may be able to use immediately. So we're not talking about doing things in cycles until they are correct this time. No, we're talking about offering finished deliverables. And if you take a look at the table on page 18, what you see is our main goal is speed. And you also see one of the main distinguishing factors between iterative and incremental is frequent, smaller deliveries. And I quite like that because there's a stress on the fact that these are smaller deliveries. All right. Now, if you turn the page over to where this is fleshed out in more detail, it says some projects optimize for speed of delivery. Many businesses and initiatives cannot afford to wait for everything to be completed. In these cases, customers are willing to receive a subset of the overall solution. So watch that word. Subset of the overall solutions. It says this frequent delivery of smaller deliverables is called an incremental life cycle. Let's read a little bit more on the next page, page 23. So this is 22 to 23 in the Agile Practice Guide. And it reads, incremental life cycles optimize work for delivering value to sponsors or customers more often than a single final product. So if you take a look, juxtaposing the PMBOK Guide 7th edition on page 37, there's a problem with that because what it's showing is a progressive development and it's showing a house as an example. That's a very poor example because incremental is all about speed of delivery. You cannot speed up delivery significantly when dealing with something like a house. That is a pretty bad example. Now, on the flip side, if you were developing a product, a widget, something that might have been done in a repeatable fashion, it is possible to deliver batches of that thing. For example, a flask or a mug. You could deliver several of those in increments. So instead of waiting to get all 1,000, suppose I supply Amazon and I have Amazon waiting for me to deliver 1,000. Instead of waiting, speed is of the essence. So I could actually deliver 300, 200 in the next iteration or in the next round, 500 in the next round, on and on till I get to 1,000 or whatever that number is. So instead of looking at delivering things in big one-time deliveries like 1,000, I could break that up into smaller deliveries, but frequent smaller deliveries. I could have 20 deliveries of 50. I could have 50 deliveries of 20. But that's what incremental is. Incremental isn't about doing things piecemeal on a big delivery, such as a house. It's about smaller pieces of work. So the example there is not appropriate because it doesn't show frequent, smaller deliveries. So this is at odds with the Agile Practice Guide. And I wanted to point that out because as some of you go through, you're looking for a sensible example that will give you clarity. Well, for incremental, don't think about doing things piecemeal on a big project. Think about getting everything done to deliver frequent, smaller deliveries, like a project to supply someone with a widget or a product in batches. Okay, let's read. It says, as the project continues, the team may deviate from the original vision. The team can manage the deviations because the team delivers value sooner. You see, that's the key thing. The degree of change and variation is less important than ensuring customers get value sooner than at the end of the project. You see, our goal is speed. Providing a customer a single feature or a finished piece of work is an example of the incremental approach. For example, builders may want to show a finished room or floor of a building before they continue with the remainder of the building. In that case, they may complete a floor with fixtures, paint, and everything else intended for the finished floor before proceeding to the next floor. The customer is able to see and approve of the style, color, and other details, allowing adjustments to be made before further investments of time and money are made. This reduces potential rework and or customer dissatisfaction. So you can see on page 23, a better example, still from the world of construction, but not showing things being done in the framing and the kitting out of the building and stuff like that. They're talking about a floor being done, and that is value delivered. And then the next floor, value delivered, and talking about increments, if you get what I mean. So the example on page 37 in the 7th edition, just be careful when you're taking a look at that. Okay, let's talk about the final one that we all know about. Final one is an agile approach. And when we talk about agile, agile is incremental plus iterative. It provides the best of both worlds. Not only are you delivering in increments, but you're also repeating until things are right. Just because you're done with one iteration does not mean that you are exempt from getting that work right. And that's why in the world of Agile, you hear things like technical debt, and you also hear defect repair. So let's take a look at what we have as far as this is concerned. And just so you know, Agile is also known as adaptive. So we can say adaptive. This is not made very clear, unfortunately, on page 38. Instead of using the word agile, clear cut, it reads adaptive. Just know it's the same thing. Also know that adaptive, in times of old, we would refer to this as change driven. We probably still do now, but you don't hear this a lot. But agile is also known as a change driven approach. So let's first read the 7th edition. It says, adaptive approaches are useful when requirements are subject to high level of uncertainty and volatility and are likely to change throughout the project. A clear vision is established at the start of the project, and the initial known requirements are refined, detailed, changed, or replaced in accordance with the user feedback, the environment, or unexpected events. Adaptive approaches use iterative and incremental approaches. However, on the far side of the adaptive methods, the iterations tend to get shorter and the product is more likely to evolve based on stakeholder feedback. So what they're saying is, in the passage of time of an agile project, we're seeing a higher level of changeability. So think about it like this. And with time, you could see an increase in the changeability on that project, for example. Now let's go over to the Agile Practice Guide to talk about this a little bit more. So in the Agile Practice Guide, as usual, we'll go to page 19 and then we'll pick up from there. On page 19, it says, Agile life cycles leverage both aspects of iterative and incremental. So it's an iterative plus incremental life cycle. When teams use agile approaches, they iterate over the product to create finished deliverables. So we iterate over the product. We get early feedback through things like the minimum viable product. The customer provides the customer visibility. The customer gets visibility. You could say it's transparent. Everything is transparent. And our main goal, when we talk about the world of Agile, if you take a look at page 18, you can see it's all about value. It's so value driven. Value driven. Our highest priority, remember, it's to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable products. So we're really all about value. It's value driven. The other thing that you can note from this table is that we have frequent, small deliveries. So you've got the best of both worlds. You're doing things until they're correct, but you're also delivering as expediently as possible. It says on page 19, the team gains early feedback and provides the customer visibility, confidence, and control of the product. Because the team can release earlier, the project may provide an earlier return. So we think about the early return, and that's all about value, right? This is why we talk about things such as the cost of delay in projects that are of an agile nature, because we know that delaying the value could end up being bad for the customer. So we want to deliver as soon as possible, and we want to count the cost of delivering later than we would have normally. It says, because the team can release earlier, the project may provide an earlier return on investment because the team delivers the highest value work first. That's another hallmark of Agile, is delivering the valuable stuff as soon as you possibly can. Now let's turn the pages over to where Agile is talked about in the Agile Practice Guide on page 24. It reads, I'll just put the page here, Agile Practice Guide, page 24. In an Agile environment, the team expects requirements to change. The iterative and incremental approach provides feedback to better plan the next part of the project. However, in Agile projects, incremental delivery uncovers hidden or misunderstood requirements. And then you've got two types of Agile deliveries talked about here. We've got the flow-based, for example, Kanban, and iteration-based, like Scrum, for example. And you've got images of those, and you've got some robust explanations. In iteration-based Agile, the team works in iterations, time boxes of equal duration. In flow-based Agile, the team pulls features from the backlog based on its capacity to start work rather than on an iteration-based schedule. So you get the idea. That is all in the Agile Practice Guide. Now, if you go over to the PMBOK Guide 7th edition and you take a look at page 38, 39, towards the end, it reads, while agility is a wide mindset that is broader than a development framework, Agile approaches can be considered adaptive. So they do clarify, though not upfront, that adaptive means the same thing. Some Agile approaches entail iterations that are 1 to 2 week duration with a demonstration of the accomplishments at the end of each iteration. The project team is very engaged with the planning for each iteration. The project team will determine the scope they can achieve based on a prioritized backlog, estimate the work involved, and work collaboratively through the iteration to develop the scope. So that is pretty much the summary of what we have in the 7th edition. Now, if you turn over to page 43, you see an example of a predictive life cycle. That's good. Then you turn over to page 44. Again, this is where I have issues with figure 2-10, because the impression that it gives is one that is more of an iterative approach. When you deliver incrementally, there may or may not be any join between the cycles of delivery, right? The idea is for each cycle to deliver a standalone product batch. So what we have on page 44, if you're not aware of the Agile Practice Guide, page 18 and 19, you could get thrown off. It reads here, figure 2-10 shows a cycle with an incremental development approach. There are 3 iterations of plan, design, and build. So you see, they're talking about iterations in incremental. That is a problem to me because it muddies the waters, especially for people who are learning. I would rather you think of incremental as being within a time box, getting some discrete deliverables delivered, as opposed to seeing you developing stuff over iterations. That's muddying the waters because now you're beginning to combine the concept of iterations and increments, you see. So if we're talking incremental, let's just leave incremental as delivering batches one time, deliver, frequent smaller deliveries. Now, if we're talking about iterations, let's talk about expanding things over time. So that would, in my mind, would have been a much better image to illustrate something of an iterative nature, because now they're muddying the waters on page 44. You go to page 45. Page 45 is a breakdown of how it could work in the world of Agile. And I would say, yes, that is a worthwhile illustration, but not as bad as page 44. All right. So for those of you who have been looking at both books and wondering, how do I align my thoughts regarding iterative, incremental, agile? Just remember, predictive and iterative are one-time delivery. So let me clarify that for you. Predictive and iterative, they have in common the one-time delivery, one-time delivery, right? Iterative is different in that it repeats the cycle until correct. Predictive is different because we're going to hit whatever we're doing one time. That's the idea. We do it one time and there's a big bang at the end. You know, it could be a good bang, it could be dependent, which is why people move away from predictive these days, because we don't want to deliver at the end only to find out what we delivered is not what the customer wanted, or we have a need to deliver to the customer as early as possible. All right, then we have incremental, and agile. And you got to remember, these are frequent deliveries. Okay, the language is very specific. For incremental, it's frequent smaller deliveries, and for agile, it's frequent small deliveries. I think the authors of the Agile Practice Guide very rightfully wanted to point out the difference between the mindsets of let's get things out as quickly as possible. If we have 500 of them, let's get them out. Let's not wait till we've got all 1,000 or 2,000. And then as far as agile deliveries, it's all about the value, okay? I hope this is the beginning for some of you to better understand what exactly these 4 life cycles are. If you found this to be useful, please hit like, subscribe, share with your friends, and put any questions in the comments below. What do you think about these life cycles? You take care. Bye for now.